Self-empowerment. Transforming values into virtues. By Dr. Zen Udani. Empowerment is an enduring buzzword. It means, among other things, transforming people in an organization into proactive participants in the organization's daily quest for growth, development, and excellence. When applied to individual persons, the idea is more aptly called self-empowerment. Self-empowerment should be everyone's concern. It focuses on enabling a person to attain both personal and professional excellence, that is, excellence in one's character and in one's work. Hence, self-empowerment involves more than just acquiring skills and achieving professional competence. It calls above all for the inculcation and practice of the perennial moral values that ought to govern private and public life. In other words, mere awareness or acceptance of these values isn't enough. From this initial stage, individual persons should move on to the level of commitment and action, that is, turning such values into virtues or habits. In this way, people truly become empowered, spurring themselves toward excellence. And they show this attitude by not stopping at simply being good persons, but rather freely striving to be better until the very best is drawn out of them. In the process, they become highly productive and effective contributors to social progress. Character and competence. Self-empowerment is different from the effort aimed at one's material improvement, and driven mainly by the ambition to have more wealth, more power, etc. Rather, it springs from an individual's desire to be more, that is, become a better person. True self-empowerment thus shows in a person's effort to transform the work-related, as well as the core moral, values that he believes in or subscribes to into stable dispositions or habits, in such a way that they become second nature to him. Through willful practice, these values thus become habitual and distinctive features of a person's character and conduct. They provide a firm foundation for the development of professional competence and personal integrity. In a speech to the Corps of Cadet at the U.S. Military Academy, General Norman Schwarzkopf underscored the equal importance that should be given to competence and character in defining leadership. He said, "I've met a lot of leaders in the Army who were very competent but they didn't have character. And for every job they did well, they sought reward in the form of promotions, in the form of awards and decorations, in the form of getting ahead at the expense of someone else, in the form of another piece of paper that awarded them another degree. Competent people, but they lacked character. I've also met a lot of leaders who had superb character but who lacked competence. They weren't willing to pay the price of leadership, to go the extra mile because that's what it took to be a great leader. And that's sort of what it's all about. To lead in the 21st century, to take soldiers, sailors, airmen into battle, you will be required to have both character and competence. Human values are the cornerstone of self-empowerment. But they have to be turned into good habits, or virtues, if they are to have any practical or operational impact. If some people are truly admirable, it is usually because of the consistency between their principles and their actions. This harmony is precisely the result of a continual effort to transform one's beliefs and values into virtues that in turn show forth in one's conduct. In Filipino, there are two words that capture many of these human values, pagpapakatao and pakikipagkapwatao. Empowerment through work. Work, which usually takes up more than 50% of our waking hours, provides many opportunities and occasions for self-empowerment. In the first place, the upright use of the mind and the free will trains a person in virtues such as creativity, initiative, and sense of responsibility. Even more basic is the need for industriousness, something that is expected of anyone who seeks to be gainfully employed and to earn enough to support himself and his family. The social relationship developed through work likewise provide ample opportunities for the transformation of human values into virtues. The difficulties inherent to work and to working with other people call for the exercise of many virtues, for example, patience, understanding, generosity, perseverance, and good humor. Indeed, if one is convinced that work done honestly and well is a basic human value, one will never look at work as a form of punishment. Rather, one will view human work as a school in which one can grow in wisdom and strength of character. One adjective best describes the self-empowered person at work: proactive. The proactive self-empowered person acts with initiative, sense of responsibility, and foresight, because he is led by human values that help him see and carry out what he ought to do. Thus, even in the absence of supervision, he gets things done. Moreover, he achieves his objectives without compromising his integrity. By contrast, a person who merely reacts to events invariably finds himself either improvising or being swept to and fro against his wishes. He is thus prone to pessimism. But what truly transforms the individual as a person is the effort to think and act with integrity in all the facets of his or her life. If it is of great value to be human, it is of even greater dignity to be a better human being. As a local saying aptly puts it, modeling, mogging tau, pero mahirap magpakitao. It follows that the core moral values of love of God, selfless concern for others, chastity, truthfulness, and the like, strengthen a person's character. They also prod the individual to aspire to be competent in handling personal and professional matters. Where comes greatness? In his book Seeds of Greatness, Dennis Waitley shares some insights into the inner sources of self-empowerment. He recalls this priceless lesson from his grandmother: "The seeds of greatness," she began, "what are they? Are they special genes, transmitted to offspring by superior parents? Are they inborn talents? Are they seeds of exceptional learning abilities or intelligence quotients?" No, my grandma shook her head emphatically. The seeds of greatness are not dependent upon the gifted birth, the inherited bank account, the intellect, the skin-deep beauty, the race, the color, or the status. The seeds of greatness are attitudes and beliefs that begin in children as baby talk, as do's and don'ts, as casual family chatter, bedtime stories, locker room gossip, as offhand, almost unnoticed, delicately transparent ideas, like flimsy cobwebs, at first, then, with years of practice, become like unbreakable steel cables to shackle or strengthen our characters, throughout the rest of our adult lives. A person then needs to have a sound set of values that will urge him to do good and avoid evil. These values will help him persevere in performing good acts, and the repetition of such acts will in turn result in the formation of good habits. On the other hand, a person who makes no effort to acquire sound values, runs the danger not only of weakening his character, but also of eventually falling prey to one vicious form of corruption or another. The roots of corruption. Genuine self-empowerment requires an awareness of where a man's spiritual enemies lie. A few years back, the members of a task force, which had been given the responsibility of instituting reforms in a government institution, began their work by analyzing the roots of corruption. They discerned three basic elements present in all forms of corruption. First, there is always an element of attraction, something that appeals to or arouses any of the so-called three concupiscences in man: the concupiscence of the eyes, the concupiscence of the flesh, and the pride of life. People fall prey to the concupiscence of the eyes when they give in to a disorderly desire for wealth. Consider, for example, those who commit all sorts of crime for money, or those who worm themselves into government positions with the intention of illegally enriching themselves. Then there are those who get corrupted because they yield to the concupiscence of the flesh, for example, married men who keep mistresses, superiors who curry sexual favors from subordinates by threatening to fire them or block their promotion if they refuse to give in, or employees who allow themselves to become accomplices in shady deals in exchange for illicit pleasures. As for the pride of life, we can cite those who lust for power at all cost and who are willing to throw all moral principles overboard to get the positions they covet or to keep themselves in power. A second element common to all forms of corruption is rationalization. Corrupt people become past masters at justifying their actions. We have all heard the familiar lines, "My salary is too low, I need to earn more to support my family. If my bosses are doing it, why can't I? This is the only way we can survive in our business. Everyone in the industry is doing it anyway." In offering these reasons, corrupt people want to make it appear that they are just being forced by circumstances. In most cases, it is doubtful whether that is really so. Thirdly, people become corrupt because they give in to occasions of corruption. Certain positions, situations, places, and persons can provide such occasions. A person who is not determined to avoid these occasions will easily succumb to the attraction and will just as easily justify his or her misdeed. Corruption militates against self-empowerment because it encourages the vices that destroy people's lives. To be genuinely self-empowered, a person has to be resolved to pursue the moral good and to practice the human and moral virtues. Beyond self. Self-empowerment does not begin and end in the individual. It also has its social dimension. We can think of a family, an institution, or a whole country as a chain whose links correspond to the individuals who make up the collective whole. Since a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, it makes a lot of difference if the chain is made up of self-empowered persons, or of lazybones and softies. We should also remember the ripple effects that personal example has, either way, on other people. Habits, whether good or bad, are contagious. The exemplary work habits and moral conduct of even a few individuals can turn around a decadent and moribund institution. In the same way, the immoral behavior of the chief executive of a private firm or of a government agency can in no time corrupt the whole organization. Consider, in this light, the story of a father who had 3 sons. This man had a good job in a company, but he would habitually come home drunk. The not-so-edifying example of their father wasn't lost on the 3 children. The eldest began to show signs of becoming a bum. When reprimanded for it, he excused himself by saying that he didn't want to work because he didn't want to become a drunkard like his dad. Since he would very often see his father come home from work reeking of liquor, the eldest son had concluded that work must be the reason for his father's habitual drunkenness. Thus, the son hated the idea of working. Hatred had also begun to burn in the heart of the second son, but its object was something else, the company where the father worked. From this son's viewpoint, the company was such a terrible place to work in that it drove his father to drinking bouts. "When I grow up, I wouldn't work for that kind of company," he blurted out one day. The youngest son, however, saw things differently. For him, the culprits were his father's colleagues at work. He blamed them for getting his father hooked on alcohol. In anger, he once said, "If any of Dad's officky mates comes around, I'll beat him up." It did not occur to any of the 3 sons that the only one to blame may have been their father, who seemed unable to control himself and live the virtues of temperance and sobriety. What is clear, however, is that the father's poor example had poisoned the minds of his children. The need of the times. Indeed, self-empowerment has a far-reaching impact. As a matter of fact, it is what is needed for a genuine moral recovery to take place in Philippine society. Of course, we cannot downplay the influence of the home, schools, the mass and social media, and the quality of government leadership on the lives of people. But they are just that, influences. Individual persons are still the ones who determine whether they will live as men or as beasts, hence, they are also the ones ultimately responsible for their behavior. Nonetheless, we must admit that no authentic self-empowerment takes place without God's blessing and help. We have to turn to Him and to His channels of grace so that we can be truly empowered in the right, that is, morally upright sense.